And then anybody watches the recording can listen to us make small talk until Arlene gets here. How are you doing, Noreen?
Good. Just so everybody knows, I had a little cataract surgery yesterday, so I feel pretty good. Thank you for asking, Kat.
On just one eye or two? Here's Arlene.
Just one for now. The other one will be done in a couple of weeks.
You don't seem disfigured at all.
Well, I do have a little tattoo over my eye where they marked about 6 million times which eye they were supposed to work on, but that's a good thing. I'm happy about that. They got the right eye, that's for sure.
Sure. Right, the right eye, which is the right eye. So
Yes.
Arlene is here. We now have a quorum. So I'm going to start the meeting. We are, this is the meeting of April 19th, 2023. The entire Board of Health is here. Myself, Catherine Hilton, Garrett Simonson, Noreen Pease, Arlene Reed, and Wim Levine. We also have Mary Jo Johnson and Maria Kopicki. I hope I'm saying that right. And Miriam DeFont. Thank you, Maria. And Miriam DeFont and Rob Kibler. And somebody could be muted.
Yeah, I think it's
there's
Arlene,
noise.
if you can mute.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right. There we go.
That was it. Okay, for our traditional first item of business, the minutes of the previous meeting. Can we accept them as written, or were there? Oh no, we can't, because it seems to me I sent out the meeting minutes with a note in the middle of them saying I'm going to need some help here, but I didn't get any. Does anybody have anything that they can add to the part where I was shaky? If not, let's just put it off for a future meeting.
I'll get back to you, Kat. I think that part was talking about the capacity assessment review that we did for the Public Health Excellence Grant, and I just didn't have a chance to get to it this week. So I'll get you some notes.
That would be helpful, because I got bounced out of the meeting for technical reasons, and so I kind of missed.
I know, and I apologize. I will do that.
No, I know you've been busy. It's not a big deal. Okay. The world can live without our minutes for another couple of weeks. So not yet on that. I have on the agenda updates, if any. I went to the district meeting today, and Phoebe was there and talking about the results of the capacity assessment for Northfield and Irving, since they're not part of our Public Health Excellence Grant coalition. And one thing, there were a few things that I took away from that, but the one that's noteworthy right now is that apparently we are supposed to schedule a meeting with our Board of Health, between our Board of Health and somebody. It wasn't clear to me who it was, to discuss the COVID after action report. Noreen, do you know anything about that?
We got an invitation a couple of weeks ago from Dan Nietzsche to discuss the COVID after action report, and to ask everybody to attend the annual meeting of MAFCO. So it has to do with MAFCO. And some of us in MAFCO are feeling like we still have some matters to settle before, or discuss before we schedule those meetings. So some towns have gone ahead and scheduled those meetings, and some have not. We have another MAFCO meeting scheduled for the 8th of May.
So you'll let us know when we should schedule a meeting with who is it that we would be scheduling a meeting with?
Dan Nietzsche. Nietch. Oh boy.
Okay,
something like
enough.
that. I'll get back to you.
Okay. And is that
he's the new FEP planner. That was anyway. He left FERCog, then he came back, and he's been appointed the new FEP planner.
Okay. Okay. While we're on the topic of public health matters, I understand we're supposed to vote to join a tobacco coalition, but I heard today from Phoebe that basically there aren't any tobacco coalitions available to join. And so they were she was talking about actually joining with a tobacco coalition in South Hadley.
Do you want me to address that now, Kat?
Yes, please.
I understand that there is a Northampton Tobacco Commission, and I believe they are accepting members. And I would recommend that we join that Tobacco Commission. And the reason our Public Health Excellence Grant is needing to join a public health, to join a Tobacco Commission is because a couple of its members, we are one, did not join previously. And the state is requiring as one of the suggestions for improvement under the capacity assessment review that all towns join. And I suspect that Shutesbury had not joined CAT because we don't have any retail businesses that sell tobacco.
Exactly.
However, we might sometime down the road, and should we, as a member of a tobacco commission, what would happen is, particularly in the Northampton Commission, the director of public health, who's Meredith O'Leary, would come and conduct investigations. For example, should there be concern that an underage person might be purchasing tobacco in one of the facilities that sells tobacco in your community. So it would just allow us to have that flexibility down the road should we ever have a facility that sells tobacco. It also, the group also provides information and education. And I don't see that we would lose anything by joining. In fact, we might learn a little bit about what's going on in the state with regard to tobacco usage prevention.
I'm not in any way objecting to joining the tobacco.
No, I didn't think you were. I was just trying to be informative.
Yes, but obviously we didn't join one because we didn't have any use for it. It came up at the district meeting today, though, that the tobacco coalitions can be a good place to get together on regulations for other products, cannabis products, and there are all kinds of new weird things that we would possibly need to regulate and have local bylaws, and that would be a kind of good nexus for dealing with that. So would you make a motion for the vote that we need? Do you understand exactly what we need to vote on? Because I do not.
Yeah, I would, we simply need a motion. I'll make a motion from the Board of Health that we join a currently available tobacco commission. Our first choice would be.
It's coalition.
Oh, it is? It's not commission? Yes. You're sure? Okay, coalition. And that Greenfield would be our first choice, but then Northampton would be our first choice. And should Northampton not be available, we would look for another compatible coalition to join.
Okay, now, okay, do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. So discussion.
My further discussion would be that my understanding that Jen Hoffman, who's the Director of Public Health in Greenfield, would help us make the application or even make it on our behalf. So that's to the Board of Health. So we simply need to get the board's approval and vote to Jen's should we decide to agree in the affirmative to join.
I'm wondering about the Northampton versus South Hadley thing because just because of the other two towns in the district. And I don't know if it's important for us to stay with the district or for us to stay with the Valley Health Collaborative?
I think if we keep it flexible enough, we could join either one, but I don't, my understanding is the Northampton coalition has been more responsive with regard to those towns who have had a need for someone to come up and do an investigation concerning some businesses that they felt were selling tobacco to underage individuals, have been much more responsive and had staff available to do it than some of the others. Let's put it that way without naming who they might be.
Okay, except of course that does not apply to us. And
Well, at the moment, it does not.
If I understand our zoning correctly, it's not going to apply to us unless our zoning changes. Does anybody know that for sure? Well, in any case, how about this? We can vote to join, as you said, an available public health coalition, and we will convey the results of that vote to Jen Hoffman. Does that
Sounds
work?
good.
Okay,
I think, excuse me, I think the motion was to join an available tobacco coalition, not a public health coalition.
oh, I'm sorry, I misspoke. You were absolutely right. Okay, any more discussion? Okay, let's vote. Garrett,
Yeah.
Noreen,
Yes.
Arlene,
Yes,
Wim,
Yes.
and Kat, yes. So that is unanimous, and I will convey the results of that vote to Jen.
Before we go to the artificial turf, one other quick update is that I did speak with Becky and Rita completed the paperwork necessary to file for participation in the opioid settlements.
Wonderful.
Good.
That is in motion. So we would still need to go back to the select board for further discussion about the use of those funds collaboratively with the towns in the Valley Health Collaborative. So we will need to get back on their agenda once the intermunicipal agreement is in a more final place.
Okay. We have not seen the latest draft of that, by the way. Okay. Is there anything more in the way of updates that we need to consider? Okay, hearing none, let us move on to our guests, Maria and Mary Jo, who are going to talk to us about artificial turf. Welcome.
Thank you. Maria and I agreed that I would speak first. She actually has put quite a bit of time into studying this issue and has prepared a PowerPoint presentation for you, which I think will be really helpful. But, you know, I thought maybe I would just tell you a little bit about who I am. I'm a resident of Shutesbury, an acupuncturist and massage therapist, and I've had a long interest in public health and specifically the way that environmental toxins affect the body. So I've known about PFAS, and when I heard that there's a possibility that our kids could be exposed to it when they play sports, I thought, well, it's worthwhile getting involved in doing some education and at least some education, and then possibly being involved in helping to protect the public from people who are involved in the manufacture, and even the people involved in the disposal, as well as people that live around an area that could potentially be toxic to them. If we could protect them, that would be great. So I don't want to take a whole lot of time, though. I just want for Maria to be able to present what she has to say, because I think it's really good. So without further ado, Maria is a doctor and she's from Amherst, and she has kids in the school system and she plays sports. So there she is. She knows a lot.
Okay. Take it away, Maria.
Thank you. Yes, hi, I'm Maria Kapicki. I'm an Amherst resident. And just by way of introduction, I am a physician. I'm not practicing now. During the pandemic, I worked as a case investigator and a outbreak specialist with the state group that was doing contact tracing. And then I worked at the Boston Public Health Commission, again, doing outbreak specialist work. And I learned about this, about what was going on in October, is when everybody kind of got dialed into it down here in Amherst, and then learning that there was an intention to put in an artificial turf field at the high school. And if it's okay with you, if I can ask permission to share screen, I'll try to zip through them. We shared information with you, which I hope you had a chance to look at, but it's just kind of, it's basically summarizing. I'll go quickly, and I want to give us a chance to, to have a dialogue. Is that all right with you?
That's okay with me. Garrett, can you manage that?
I think you have to do it, Kat.
I think I have to do it.
You have host, and I think you might have to take it away.
Well, look, there it is.
There we go.
Yeah, I tried it and it just worked. So
Okay.
Amazing.
All right, let me go from here. Okay. There's a number of us in town who are very much against installing artificial turf. We hope to give you the reasons from a public health perspective. Oh dear. Okay, there we go. Just to start off, the Massachusetts Association of Health Boards talks about why is this something that that boards of health should be weighing in on, and they describe some of your functions, and one of which is to protect those they serve from environmental health risks, protect from damage and pollution. So it does, I believe, have a you do have a
presentation on artificial turf that's going on now by a doctor. You don't have to. I'm just asking.
Are we good? So one of the things that we know from a great deal of research is that there is a higher injury rate on artificial turf fields versus natural grass fields. This is an example of some of the abrasions of turf burn that can happen. Higher risk of skin infections, sometimes with MRSA, orthopedic injuries, predominantly ankle and foot, although some studies suggest for knee as well. Concussion can be an increased risk because of how hard the surface can be, particularly if it's not well maintained. And these fields get extremely hot, and there's risk of heat stroke and stress, dehydration, and thermal burns from contact. The human exposure to the toxins in these products come from actually all parts of the product. It's not just the artificial turf, the blades of grass themselves. It's also the different types of infill. And the route of exposure is by ingestion, and there's small particles, but also dust, and there can be dermal absorption and inhalation, again, of that dust. And these are just some of the chemicals that we're talking that are in these products. PFAS has gotten a lot of press lately, and it's very much in the news, and it's very much on the EPA and DEP's mind. But there's also volatile organic compounds. There's carcinogens, heavy metal, lead, cadmium, hydrocarbons, neurotoxins. So there are a lot of toxins in this material. The risk is also to the environment, which will then obviously expose humans and other animals down the line. Again, PFAS and other leachates coming off it. This is basically a field is about 40,000 pounds of plastic, and microplastics come off both in the infill, but the blades themselves, they break down with weathering from the UV radiation and just mechanical abrasion. These materials are not recyclable. There's no recycling of this material in the US. There's one place out in Denmark, but that is not available. These products being made of plastic. There's the petrochemicals are what's used. So it's fossil fuels that are used in the production of these materials. They also require disinfectants and microbicides, which will also get off into the soil and water and to the people that are around them. I don't know how much you guys have been following the PFAS, but I imagine you have, and there are a number of different effects from PFAS. And just to be clear, there are no artificial turf fields that do not have PFAS. Every field that has been tested by independent researchers, Graham Peasley at the University of Notre Dame has tested a very wide array of the turf, and they all have PFAS. So these risks that we see here are going to be present no matter what turf product you get. There's also climate impacts. We talked about the fact that these surfaces get extremely hot, and you can actually see this with imaging. There's biome destruction because everything that's underneath this 2-acre area is no longer living. There's greenhouse gas production coming off the field as these plastics degrade. There's no carbon dioxide sequestration like you'd have with a grass field. And again, there are a number of the fossil fuels that are used to manufacture these, and there's an enormous amount of water that's used in the manufacture of these products. This is an example of something from that Mount Sinai Hospital Children's Environmental Health Center. Gives us an example of if you are playing on artificial surfaces, what should you be thinking of? And Mary Jo did mention that I do play sports. I play on these fields. I have kids who play on fields. I was just freezing at a game today watching my kids play outside. I am very much an athlete and a mom of athletes. And if you've ever watched kids play on a field, the first thing they do is throw everything on the ground, including their mouth guards and their water bottles, and then they sit on the ground. And when if you've ever been to an artificial turf field, you'll see that the infill, it just gets all over them, and it's especially, especially obvious if it's the crumb rubber, but the other types of infill do as well. And as much as you might want to, ask people to wash your hands before eating, drinking, or adjusting your mouth guard and cleaning cuts, if you've ever seen it in person, anybody that's got kids knows this does not happen. This is not really a reasonable expectation of how to keep safe. The cost, and I know that I was doing some reading for this, and I want to talk about the cost because it was part of some talk about making public health decisions. The costs are much higher for artificial turf than for a grass field, both in initial costs, and for this project, they're nowhere near hitting the mark for the artificial turf, although there is enough money to do a grass field. And the life cycle costs are far higher. Again, there's these fields that need to be replaced every 8 to 10 years, and that 750, who knows what that will be in 8 to 10 years. And there's no money for that in any budget. We don't have the equipment that is required to maintain these fields, which is also extremely important to decrease the risks. And there would need to be testing of both the materials themselves and then surveillance of the soil and water around it. These figures at the bottom were given, I've been attending many webinars, and one person who takes care of both artificial turf and grass fields gave these projections for the 20-year cost projection for just the turf field itself being oh boy, sorry, I might have to, let me go back here. There we go. 2.8 million versus 1.4 million for natural turf. So it's far more expensive. And that also means that if we don't have the money, then we're not going to maintain it. And we might not be able to, the project would be delayed and start because we can't do it until we have the money for it. That same person, Ian Lacey, this is his name up here, he gave, there's this kind of notion that, oh, if you have an artificial turf field, you just, set it and forget it. And that's absolutely not how it is. This is just an example of all of the things that have to be done throughout the year, multiple times, some weekly. So there is a lot of maintenance involved. There are a number of ways that people are looking to restrict both artificial turf and PFAS in general. We're trying to get PFAS out of our lives as much as humanly possible because it is bioaccumulative. And there are at least, there's about 20 between House and Senate bills in the current session that are getting a lot of support and moving ahead. And so we don't know, for all we know, these products may be banned in not very distant future. Multiple municipalities in Massachusetts have already got bans or restrictions in some way or another against artificial turf. And the Amherst, Pelham, and Leverett boards of health have weighed in and given advisories against the installation of the turf down at the high school. New York just came out with a ban, and Maine already had one, and so this is happening all over. It's a very active issue. So what is the alternative? Well, natural grass is the alternative, and this gives an kind of a range of like the going from the worst down at the bottom in terms of toxicity, up to the top, which is the safest alternative. But even these synthetic turfs with other types of infill still have. It's still a plastic field. It still has the PFAS, and the infills still have toxins in them. It's just not as much as crumb rubber, but they're still very problematic. There is concern about, like, can this meet our needs? And actually, a grass field can meet the needs of our community. It's also important to not compare the poorly maintained and poorly constructed field that is there now to a pristine artificial turf field, and to actually look at information that we have from people who have built proper grass fields and are maintaining them properly. And TURI, the Toxic Use Reduction Institute, has some great resources. And there were case studies where they were getting between 800 and 1,800, let's say, annual playing hours on a grass field, whereas artificial turf advocates tend to want to claim it's in the 600 to 800 range. But actual experience is that it's much higher. And then it's important we can look at the field use analysis that the regional school district performed. And the fields, there's 8 fields at the middle school and high school. And the annual use on those fields didn't even reach the 800 mark here. So what we have if we have a well-constructed, well-maintained grass field, we should be able to have the playing that we need on it. Incidentally, recently the Amherst DPW it's not, obviously the budget season's happening now, but they made a request for additional equipment. They got the message that people were unhappy with the maintenance, and there's over somewhere between $200,000 and $300,000 of equipment being requested to take better care of the fields. So message received there. I'd like to wrap it up by talking about the precautionary principle. I'm sure you guys know about this already on the Board of Health. But the precautionary principle is what the Amherst Board of Health in particular brought up in explaining their decision to advise against it. And they emphasize that the burden of proof for potentially harmful actions by industry or government rests on the assurance of safety, and that when there are threats of serious damage, scientific uncertainty must be resolved in favor of prevention. So it's a form of primary prevention. The PFAS was only discovered in artificial turf in 2019. A lot of these other problems in terms of this safety and other toxins have been known for a longer time. But the evidence is really overwhelming. And we can't wait 20 years to get longitudinal studies to get definitive proof about this is the dose that, that causes this cancer. That's just not reasonable. And the precautionary principle, I believe, should be employed in this situation. We do know that the chemicals that are in artificial turf cause the significant medical conditions. And PFAS is bioaccumulative. There is no safe dose. And we'd just like to conclude by respectfully asking that you take a stance and advise against the installation of artificial turf in our community at this time. So I'm going to hop out of here, stop sharing so we can see each other again. And thank you, by the way, so much for the opportunity to come speak with you about this. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for your presentation. I want to start out with a question. Can you tell us what the rationale was for originally proposing this artificial turf?
This is something that I believe that some in the community had in mind for a while. They have the boosters had wanted to have an artificial turf for some time, and I think there had been a lot of frustration with the poor maintenance of not only it's not just the middle and high school fields that are poorly maintained. It's all the fields in town suffer from a lack of great maintenance. So I think there was increasing frustration with the condition of the field and a desire to have an artificial turf field because of this notion that it wouldn't need as much maintenance and you'd get so many more playing hours. And it is true that you can play more annual hours on an artificial turf field on average. You can get maybe 2,000 to 3,000 annual hours. However, it comes with a lot of negatives, and so some of those negatives, including PFAS, weren't even known until that people had started to look to want to get an artificial turf field. So some of this information is new, but 2,000 to 3,000 hours is not even really a reasonable amount of that would be like 9 hours per day if you played every single day that you could on the field. So sure, but that's more of like a professional level, not a community high school level amount of play that's needed. So I think it was really frustration and wanting, kind of what some other places have. But I did do some research, and a good number of the schools that we play against, in fact, I think it was more than half that I was able to get in touch with. It's not like everybody we play against has an artificial turf field. Not that that would be a great reason to do it, just because other people had it, but it's not true. We're in a lot of company of having grass fields out here. We're fortunate to live in an area that has as much space as we do.
Do other members of the Board of Health have questions? Noreen?
Yes, I'm wondering, what is the current status of this decision in Amherst? And who has made the decision? What steps are taken to make the decision?
Yeah, so it's a little complicated, so bear with me. So it's the regional school district. So it was the regional school committee who made the decision back in March of 2022 to go forward. Let me take one step back. the prime mover of the thing that really was problematic was the track. Okay, the track is in very rough shape. They haven't been able to compete on the track for years, right? So in March of 2022, the regional school district said, we've got to do something. So they did an authorization order for $1.5 million that at the very least, they could redo the track. They could resurface it and at least get that done. But they wanted to do more. So they wanted to take the track and reorient it from east-west to north-south for a couple of reasons, the sun being in the eyes and so on. But they also kind of went against the advice of Dr. Doug Slaughter, who's the finance director of the school district, who had written an order to say, if you can raise, if we get more money than the 1.5, to widen the not only resurface the track but widen it and put in either a grass field or an artificial turf field. But the regional school committee, there were some people on the regional school committee that were just like, no, we have to have artificial turf. So the order was written in March of last year that if instead of the 1.5, they were able to get to $4.7 million, which is now actually a new estimate says that it's probably closer to $5-6 million, that they would do the reorientation and an artificial turf field. So currently, we're locked into artificial turf unless the regional school committee changes its mind. Since that time, requests have been made of the all 4 towns for Community Preservation Act funds, and it was turned down by Pelham, Leverett, Shutesbury. It did not get a chance to vote on it because the district withdrew their application after those. The really important thing about this timing is that in March 2022, I don't think anybody had a clue. Nobody that I knew in Amherst had a clue about PFAS and artificial turf. Nobody was like putting it together like they're going to put in artificial turf and oh my gosh, it's got PFAS. There was I don't know if you guys remember when the Boston Globe article came out. It was a Guardian article came out about the Boston's ban on artificial turf fields. That came out right before a vote in Amherst for giving some additional money for the project. And then that started off like, we didn't know about this. And I went back and I literally watched every single meeting that happened about track and field project up until those previous votes in Amherst. Nobody mentioned PFAS once. Nobody mentioned these detrimental effects of an artificial turf field. Literally none of the downsides were mentioned. So this vote happened, I in the absence of, I think, all of the information. Once we knew about what was going on, then, people were like, oh my goodness, no, we don't want this for our community. And there's been a lot of, over 150 people have written in to say, wait a minute, we want you to have the track, we want you to have the field, but we want it to be grass. We do not want these unnecessary additional risks of an artificial turf field. So
Okay.
that's the history.
That's probably more than we actually need to
I'm
know.
so sorry.
But thank you for being thorough. I appreciate that. Are there any other questions from members of the Board of Health?
So if Shutesbury falls in line with the other towns that send their students to Amherst schools, what impact do you expect that to have on the decision making, and when would a decision be made?
Well, so what we're hoping for is that by demonstrating that there is support for the field, but not for the artificial turf, that the regional school committee will change its mind and say, we got it. We don't want to have a divisive, dangerous thing. We will pivot to grass. So that's the hope, that if we can show that it's just not the right decision for us.
Is there a timeline for that?
That right now, so I have to go back to that decision about the money. An additional $2.2 million was supposed to be raised by January. It wasn't. And at that point, it was supposed to revert back to just the track, but the regional school committee decided to go ahead. So right now, they're going ahead without having met their goal, and there really is no end point. They can't go take this thing out to bid and get it done until they have the money secured. They're at least a couple $1 million shy of that. And so we're in this limbo right now where, something's got to give, and if they pivoted to a grass field, both Leverett and CPA said, we'll give you the money if it's a grass field, come back and talk to us. That wasn't the problem, was the artificial turf. So they'd actually get more money. There is $3.4 million that's been raised so far. That's just shy of the original cost of the reorientation, expansion, and grass field. So the big project, but with a grass field. And I think that, if the regional school committee were to pivot, we could move forward. But right now, we're just in a waiting for the money.
Okay, let's consider a statement from the Board of Health. If we were to write some kind of statement on this, first we'd have to agree on it. But first, I think we need to look at what kind of standing we have here. It doesn't seem to me that as the Shutesbury Board of Health that we have any standing to talk about Amherst's environment, except insofar as it affects our children that are playing on those fields, right? So that would be, in my opinion, the focus of that. If Amherst wants to risk contaminating their groundwater and so on, for that part of it, right? That doesn't seem, we don't have any standing there, I think. But where we do have standing is where the health of Shutesbury children is involved.
Which I imagine is why Leverett and Pelham responded.
So, Board of Health, let me hear from you. What do we want to do?
Would anyone else like to offer an opinion?
How about you, Wim?
I believe, based on the prima facie evidence that's been presented here today, which includes the sending towns to Amherst Regional School, their boards of health all getting on board in opposing this, what sounds to me to be an extravagant and unsafe plan, that we should go along and agree to send a letter registering our concern about use of artificial turf.
You bring up a good point there, Wim. Do we want to register our concern about the use of artificial turf, or do we want to recommend against it?
Well, what did the other towns, how strong was their wording?
Maria, can you answer that?
They advised against. They did not say, they recommended against the installation of artificial turf at this time.
Yeah, that sounds fair to me. I mean, I don't see either from a cost analysis or from a public health or environmental risk standpoint, how this could possibly be a desirable outcome.
Noreen, were you getting ready to say something there?
I was. I believe we also received some information from you today, Kat, another letter from,
Art and Maura Keene.
yes, and Maura is a physician herself, and I don't know how many in the board know, but Art was the long-term track and field coach at cross-country coach at Amherst High School for about 35 years. And they certainly supported or backed up what Maria is presenting to us today in their letter.
Including, I might add, as Art described himself as a sort of convert away from artificial turf because he'd originally been in favor of it. And when he learned more, he changed his position and now is advocating against it.
That's interesting. Can I also just note that, you know, if this was a really good idea, why isn't someone here at our meeting promoting it?
Well, we didn't invite anybody, but you know, I mean, Mary Jo asked us to if she could come and present their point of view and ask us to endorse their position.
Was the other side aware of the meeting?
Not that I know of. I mean, I suppose not unless they read the you know, the town calendar.
I can, if I'm sorry, may I speak?
Please do.
So I mean, I've kind of been making the rounds. I've been at all of the CPA meetings and CPC meetings and all of the Board of Health meetings, and they haven't been there either. Just to report. I mean, this is the 6th meeting, or the 6th group that I've spoken with. No,
So,
seven.
okay.
It was on the agenda for the CPC meeting last month, and there was nobody that presented in favor of artificial turf in that meeting.
So, Board of Health, first of all, are we agreed that we would want to, first of all, I think are we all agreed that we are against the use of artificial turf? Is there anybody who's not against it? Okay. Are we agreed that we would wish to write in support of the anti-artificial turf faction? Okay, since I'm not seeing any objections. Arlene, are we okay? All right. So are we agreed then also that we want to write a letter advising against the use of artificial turf because of its possible harmful effect on Shutesbury children attending the Amherst schools?
So I'll move that the board draft and submit a statement against use of artificial turf to the Amherst Regional High School, or to the Regional School District.
I hear a
I would
second.
I would second that.
Further discussion? Maria?
I certainly support the motion. I'm wondering if we have any obligation to talk to the Shutesbury member of the school committee and let them know, you know, what our decision was. I just wonder if anybody has any feelings about that.
And who would that member be?
I don't know who the member is. I suppose I should, but I don't know who the Shutesbury.
I'm thinking that Maria might know.
Is it Steve Sullivan?
It is Steve Sullivan.
Really?
Yeah. And if you send it to the regional school committee, it would go to them. It would not necessarily go to the Shutesbury school committee, but if you send it to the regional school committee, all 9 members would receive it.
I'm just thinking in terms of open communication among persons in Shutesbury who serve on various boards. Do we have an obligation to let him know that we've taken this action? I'm just asking boards and members of the board that question.
I wonder if we should put it out on the town announce.
What I think certainly a courtesy to Steve,
Well, yeah, I could send it to Steve directly, certainly, but
to Noreen's point.
I might also just note while comments are still being welcomed, that this makes more sense to me, since here in Shutesbury, our board has addressed PFAS as a threat to health, and we have worked to identify and potentially remediate that problem. So it's not unfamiliar to us.
right, given our experiences of last year, for sure.
I agree with all that's been said, and I think that it would be at the very least a courtesy to communicate with Steve Sullivan first, and then to send a more general letter to the regional school committee.
That seems fair. Are we ready to vote? Is there any more discussion? Okay. Yes or no? Garrett,
Yes.
Noreen,
Yes.
Arlene,
Yes.
Wim,
Yes.
Pat, yes. So it's unanimous. Would you like me to draft this and then send it around for your final approval, or do you just want me to write it and send it?
I'm totally comfortable with your ability to draft a letter, but if you want to, I'd also be happy to read it.
I've noticed that when I write things, Garrett often has some helpful hints, so maybe I'll send it at least to Garrett and to the rest of you if you want to get it. Are you okay with that, Garrett?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. There we are. Thank you, Maria and Mary Jo, for coming in.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, just one thing, to whom do we address this letter?
Are you asking me? Oh,
Yep.
sorry. So if you send it to the regional school district, I'm sorry, the regional school committee, but it would be good to also let Superintendent Morris know. And I don't think you'd have to. You could send it to. I probably would send it to Dr. Slaughter as well. Doug Slaughter, the finance director of the schools. He's the one that has presented on the project, so he's been taking point on it.
Would you do one more thing for me? Would you send an email to the Board of Health with the contact information where you want it to be sent?
Yes, absolutely.
Great.
I'll do that as soon
Great.
as-
That would be really helpful.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Bye.
Good night. Okay.
Who's this Cliff Reed guy?
The lurker. He's a lurker. All right. So that was that. That went quite a bit over what we intended. So we have received a lengthy complaint claiming that Lot 032 is a nuisance and an imminent threat to the public health. And you have all received much verbiage on this subject. And I wonder if I can have some thoughts from you. Don't all speak at once.
I have wondered, what are the responsibilities of the Board of Health from a statutory point of view or other? How are we, what measures are we required to take over what required period of time at this?
Garrett, have you gotten straight on that? I know you were reading the MHB handbook on that.
Okay, so based on my read of, let me get here, hold on. So this is from the legal handbook for Massachusetts Boards of Health, the 3rd edition, from the Massachusetts Association of Health Boards. So from 2021, and it's specific to nuisance complaints. So the first piece of this is that the nuisance definition is defined as either a public or a private nuisance. And so my read of this is that we would be talking about a public nuisance because it is a publicly owned property. And that the question would be, do current conditions interfere with the exercise of a public right by encroaching on public property or by causing common injury? So that would be the starting place for us. And then do we have jurisdiction over that? The general law basically gives us wide discretion to determine what constitutes a nuisance, and that we may examine nuisances that we deem may be injurious to public health. Now, the select board also has that same power under Massachusetts general law. And we know that the select board is already engaged in activities to address concerns at this site. So if we were to determine as a board that a nuisance exists, procedurally, what we would have to do is we would have to order the owner of the property to remove the nuisance within 24 hours or a reasonable time period. And that's defined by statute. And that the owner would be subject to $1,000 per day penalty for every day in which they knowingly violate the order. And that we would have to submit the order in writing. So as it relates to abatement, if the owner fails to comply with the order, we as a board may take abatement action of the nuisance at the owner's expense. But what we know is that, the town is already engaged in abatement activities related to the property in question. So that's sort of the framework that we would be operating under as it relates to nuisance complaint based on MAHB guidance.
So it seems like the first step would be to determine, and in chapter 111, section, I guess it's 122, we are given the power to deal with nuisances that are, in our opinion, injurious to public health. So the first thing I think is to find out what our opinion is. Do we have a situation that is injurious to public health?
How would it be?
Well, the complaint is alleging that there are toxic substances that are harmful, and even appears to suggest that merely breathing the air on this site is harmful to health.
But it's not in use by the public, is it?
Well, that's a very good point. It has been used intermittently by the public. There was the mock-up area, and there have been a couple of events there. It's not presently in use by the public.
where I might ask, and Garrett, maybe your read of the law could shed some light on this, but where does the burden of proof fall? That there is actually demonstrable, not like a hint of something may be going on. Where does the burden of, on whom does the burden of proof fall to demonstrate a true risk to public health? Like, do people have to fall sick and be hospitalized? Where's the evidence? And who has to prove it?
Question. We were just lectured about the precautionary principle. On the other hand, these concerns seem to be coming from a single individual, and although he attached what he claimed were supporting documents, the same individual wrote them all. So how much weight do we have to give to the concerns of a single individual that are I'm not quite sure where I'm going with that, with the end of that sentence.
Someone has their hand up.
I think that we're going to stick to a board discussion for now. We can take comment after the board is finished discussing.
Well, I can't help but hearken back to a meeting several months ago where I felt like I was chastised for asking a similar question when an intimation that there was some risk about going to the free clothing box was brought up, and I questioned, where's the proof? Like, we don't want to base decisions on hearsay. If someone is going to bring up a legitimate concern, they should be able to back it up. And I don't know that, I mean, this is my real question, because I imagine it could hold up progress and be very expensive for someone to provide the burden of proof.
Right.
And one of the
Yeah.
things I'm trying to understand when I read the request of the board is and the supporting documents that are provided is that it seems to me that this same request was submitted to DEP, a request for DEP audit in June 23rd of 2022. Basically asking for similar action, and submitted to people who are highly qualified and highly trained to make these determinations. And I didn't see that there was additional information that suggested that there was a response from DEP on it. So I don't know if they responded or they declined or they didn't move forward with the request that was submitted. But absent knowing what their opinion was of what seems to me to be a very similar request, I don't know what action we would take if they have either declined or didn't choose to respond.
If I read the document correctly, there was that original request in June of last year. There was a further request in January of this year. There was yet another request in February of this year. And at the same time that the complaint was submitted to us in this month, it was again submitted to DEP. So I think that DEP's position on this is self-evident. They have either explicitly or implicitly declined to take action on it. Now, even not knowing that, I would have said, first of all, this board is not competent to provide the kind of information that is being asked for here. And I would have said, let's kick this upstairs to our parent organization, our parent agency, DEP, and ask them what to do. Now, I can do that, but I think we know what the answer is going to be, given that they have chosen not to do anything about these concerns. They have pretty well indicated, as far as I can see, that they are not, they do not consider them a cause for concern. Now we can specific, ask them to specifically confirm that. I'm pretty certain that is the case.
Right, but that is taking a look, that's making it, I guess, I think a very reasonable assumption about what their stance is, but nevertheless, it's an assumption. And I think it might be wise for us to inquire with them. So what has been for us to say to DEP, what has been your assessment of the validity of this complaint? And do you have any recommendations to us? Something along those lines, but to coordinate, to find out what their much more professional response to this complaint has been, since we don't have an official report on that.
Right, and ask them for advice for us, what action they think we should take, if any. I would completely defer to their judgment, which is, we're all amateurs here, and everyone involved in this, including the complainant, is also an amateur. And we have, working in the town and at DEP, highly trained expert professionals on this. And those are the ones that I have confidence in. So, is there more to say? Do we want to have or do we want to move to a motion? Go ahead, Arlene.
The complainant, in all of the communications that I have read, says, please acknowledge to me that you have received this complaint. Has that acknowledgement been made to the complainant?
Yes, indeed.
And was notice given that this is on the agenda directly to the complainant? I mean, it goes out as part of the public announcement. It's posted. It
was not. I did not reach out to the complainant to say that it was on the agenda. However, I know from past experience that he receives the targeted Board of Health agendas. They go out the same way that you get them. So I feel certain that he received it. More to say?
That approach sounds perfectly reasonable to me, to defer to the experts, because we are not going to proffer an opinion on any complaint, because we are not experts in this field. So the board,
Right.
The Department of Health it should be deferred to them.
I think that possibly the intention of this complaint was to get the Board of Health to compel the town to perform the tests that the complainant thinks are appropriate. But again, I don't see us having not the authority. We have the authority to, I think, compare to order any tests we want, but we don't have an adequate knowledge to know if those tests are truly necessary.
Yeah.
So thank you.
And I am not interested in putting the town through the task of more testing or testing that has already, if it's already been performed, at additional expense to the town for repetitive testing. So
Right.
if it's already been done, I would, again, like to take DEP's advice and their assessment of the conditions and whether or not any threat to public health exists.
So perhaps a motion recommending that we contact DEP and ask them for guidance in this.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All right. More discussion? Are we ready to vote? Looks that way. Noreen,
Yes.
Garrett,
Yes.
Wim,
Yes.
Arlene,
Yes.
and Kat, yes. Okay. There we are. All right, I will do that tomorrow. I'm not positive who the appropriate person is to contact the DEP. But
I'm wondering if it's so on one of the communications that was submitted to us was the request for DEP audit, and there's the director of waste site cleanup was included on that, risk reduction section chief, emergency response section chief, audit section chief.
so do you think that I should send this request to everyone that was on the original complaint or the complaint that went to DEP?
Yeah, I'm not sure if these section chiefs all report up to this particular director of waste site cleanup. It's possible that that's the hierarchy. So maybe just leading with Elizabeth Steinhardt, who's the director of waste site cleanup.
Okay. All right. We're done with that. Are we not? Rob Kibler, would you like to speak?
Yes, thank you. Just one point. I agree that testing and retesting gets to be a very expensive and often very unnecessary process. Currently, the town is doing additional testing at the site. I believe they've done some and they're waiting for the results. Why would not the Board of Health request those results and use those results to see if there's anything that exceeds the recommended safe limits? That's a no-cost option.
Cool. And do you feel that that would in some way address this complaint? I mean, it's not like others in the town that are more involved with the process aren't also getting those results. In fact, it does make sense. And in fact, and town council did suggest that we do that. I will then, I think this is actually a good idea. I will just ask for all the test results to be sent to the board for our review.
Whether or not it will satisfy the complainant, I have no idea. But whether or not it satisfies due diligence, I think it pretty well covers you.
That seems very reasonable.
Thank you.
You know, I will ask for test results, both past and future, to be sent to the Board of Health directly.
And when and if a measurement is found to exceed allowable limits, then I don't want to just assume, but would like to get confirmation that abatement efforts are being engaged by the town. I know that they are committed to abatement of anything that exceeds allowable limits. And I don't imagine there would be any reversal in that policy. So.
Are there any other actions that you all think we should be taking? Okay, I will contact DEP and I will report on their response at our, assuming we get one, at our next meeting.
Thank you.
Is there anything else that should come before us right now? Any news, information, updates, gossip? Okay, then I suggest we adjourn.
I'll move to
Thank
adjourn.
you. On our way. Thank you all for your good work tonight.
Thank you.
Good night.